Hey guys, tonight we explore dinner parties so deadly. They made a name into medieval history like the Red Dinner for Game of Thrones. Most folks tend to think of medieval feasts as scenes from fantasy novels. Roaring fires, overflowing goblets, knights trading stories over roasted boar. But here's the thing. For many medieval nobles, accepting a dinner invitation wasn't just socially risky. It was potentially a roulette game of fatality options. Because in an era where power was everything and trust was currency, the dinner table became the perfect killing ground. Poison in the wine, betrayal between courses. Doors that locked from the outside. Death came amidst the silverware and the medieval version of ballroom lights. Tonight, we're exploring how hospitality, the very foundation of medieval society, was weaponized into one of history's most efficient murder strategies. So before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're Cecil ap Dyfnwal, Prince of Upper Gwent in Wales, and the parchment in your hands feels heavier than it should. It's an invitation. Christmas feast at Abergavenny Castle, hosted by William de Braos, one of the most powerful Norman marcher lords on the Welsh border. The seal is perfect. The language is formal, respectful even. It speaks of reconciliation, of putting aside old grievances, of breaking bread together in the spirit of Christian fellowship during the holiest season of the year. It should be an honor. Instead, your gut is screaming. Because here's what you know about William de Braos. He's ruthless. For years, he's been pushing into Welsh territory, burning villages, seizing land, crushing resistance with methodical brutality. His castle at Abergavenny sits like a stone fist on the throat of your homeland. He represents everything you've been fighting against. Norman aggression, English expansion, the slow strangulation of Welsh independence. And now, suddenly, he wants peace. Now he wants to feast together like old friends. The timing is suspicious. The gesture is too grand. But here's the problem. You can't refuse. Let that sink in for a moment. In medieval society, hospitality wasn't just a courtesy. It was sacred. To invite someone to your table was to offer them protection, to guarantee their safety under your roof. It was bound by codes older than Christianity, rooted in the fundamental belief that breaking bread together created an unbreakable bond. And the flip side of that, to refuse an invitation, especially one framed as a peace offering, was to declare yourself afraid, to admit you don't trust your host, to essentially call them a liar and a potential murderer to their face. In the brutal calculus of medieval politics, that's tantamount to a declaration of war. So you stand there, parchment trembling slightly in your hands, and you feel the trap closing before you've even made your decision. Accept, and you might be walking into an ambush. Refuse, and you give de Braos the perfect justification to escalate his aggression. I offered peace, he'll say to King Henry II, and the Welsh prince spat in my face. What choice did I have but to respond with force? Your refusal becomes his casus belli, his righteous cause for war. Either way, you lose. You look up at your wife. She's watching you from across the hall, and her face tells you everything. She knows what this invitation means. She knows the impossible position you're in. There's a warning in her eyes. Please find a way out of this, but there is no way out. Your 7-year-old son runs past, laughing, already excited about the Christmas feast at the big castle. He doesn't understand yet. He thinks this is an adventure. The taste of ash fills your mouth as you dictate your acceptance to your scribe. The words feel hollow, performative. You're playing your part in a script someone else has written. You thank Lord de Braos for his gracious invitation. You express your earnest desire for peace between your peoples. You confirm that you will arrive with your retinue of Welsh leaders, all the other princes and nobles who've also received invitations. Safety in numbers, you tell yourself, though you don't quite believe it. The sound of preparation begins immediately. Horses being readied in the courtyard, hooves striking cobblestones, the creak of leather as saddles are cinched tight, the jangle of bridles. Your men are checking weapons, not openly, but you see it. A sword tested in its sheath, a dagger tucked discreetly into a boot. Everyone feels it, this sense of wrongness, but no one speaks it aloud. Because what would you say? That you're afraid to accept hospitality? That you think a Norman lord might violate the most sacred codes of medieval society? It sounds paranoid. It sounds weak. The night before you leave, you can't sleep. You lie there listening to your wife breathe beside you, memorizing the sound. You think about your son, about whether you'll see him grow up. You think about your people, about what happens to them if you don't come back. The weight of leadership has never felt heavier. You're not just risking yourself, you're risking the future of Welsh resistance in your region. But what choice do you have? You mount your horse in the cold December dawn, your breath misting in the air. The road to Abergavenny stretches out before you, winding through valleys and forests that have been Welsh for centuries. With every mile, the feeling grows stronger. You're riding towards something you can't escape. The road behind you already feels like a noose tightening. And the worst part? You're tightening it yourself, one hoofbeat at a time, because the alternative is worse. Because in the medieval world, sometimes the only choice is which trap to walk into. And you've just chosen yours. The first thing you notice as Abergavenny Castle comes into view is how the walls seem to swallow the winter sky. Grey stone rising from grey earth under grey clouds, and you realize with a sick feeling that this is a fortress, not a home. This is where men come to die, not to feast. But you keep riding because turning back now would be suicide of a different kind. The slow suicide of lost credibility, of appearing weak before your enemies and cowardly before your own people. So you ride forward, and the iron gate swings open with a groan that sounds like a warning. Inside the bailey, Norman soldiers watch your arrival with expressions you can't quite read. Not hostile exactly, professional. They're not glaring at you like enemies, they're assessing you like livestock. William de Braose himself emerges to greet you, and his smile is perfect. Too perfect. He clasps your forearm in the warrior's greeting, and you feel how strong his grip is, how his hand lingers just a moment too long, tight enough to remind you who has the power here. Prince Sizel, he says warmly, his Norman French flowing smooth as wine. You honor my house with your presence. Come, come, the hall is warm, and we have much to celebrate. You follow him through the doorway, and the great hall opens before you like a mouth. That's the image that sticks in your mind, a mouth ready to swallow. But objectively, it's magnificent. A roaring fire in the central hearth sends shadows dancing up stone walls, hung with tapestries. Long tables are laden with food, roasted venison, whole pigs glistening with fat, pies steaming in their crusts, bowls of spiced wine that fill the air with cinnamon and cloves. The smell should be intoxicating. Rich meat, wood smoke, expensive spices, imported at great cost. Instead, it smells like a trap baited with luxury. You force yourself to smile, to exchange pleasantries with de Braose and his Norman knights. Their hands clap your shoulders, friendly gestures that feel like restraints being tested. How much force would it take to pin you down? That's what those touches are calculating. You're introduced to other Norman lords, men whose names you recognize from reports of burned villages and slaughtered cattle. They're jovial tonight, generous with their compliments about Welsh courage and Welsh pride. Every word feels like a knife being measured against your ribs. And then you see the other Welsh leaders. They're already here, princes from neighbouring territories, lords who rule the valleys and mountains that the Normans covet. You make eye contact with Gorgant ap Seisil, with Cadwallon ap Madog, with Geoffrey ap Hywel. In their faces, you see your own fear reflected back, forced smiles stretched too tight, eyes that can't stop moving, scanning, calculating. You all know something is wrong, but you're all trapped by the same social mathematics that brought you here. To voice suspicion would be to shatter the pretense of peace, and the pretense is all that's keeping you alive, maybe. The seating arrangements tell you everything if you know how to read them. And you do. You've been navigating the brutal etiquette of medieval politics your entire life. You're not seated with your own men. They've been placed at distant tables, scattered among Norman knights like Welsh pebbles in a Norman river. You're at the high table, yes, a position of honour, but you're surrounded. De Braos on one side, a Norman baron on the other. Behind you, standing against the wall at respectful intervals, are men-at-arms. They're not obviously threatening. They're simply present, armoured, armed, positioned between you and every single exit. You reach for your wine cup, and your hand brushes against your tunic where your dagger is concealed. It's a small blade, suitable for cutting meat at table, useless in any real fight. But feeling it there, hidden against your ribs, provides a microscopic measure of comfort. It's the illusion of agency, the pretense that you have some control over what happens next. You don't. You know you don't. But the human mind will grasp at any comfort, no matter how false, when fear starts to crowd out reason. The first course arrives, a rich pottage, thick with herbs and vegetables, bread still warm from the ovens, butter that melts golden on your tongue. You eat because refusing would be an insult, but the food tastes like nothing. Your senses are drowning in paranoia. You notice that the Norman knights are eating heartily, laughing, relaxed. Why wouldn't they be? They're home. They're safe. It's only you and the other Welsh leaders who are picking at your plates, whose laughter sounds brittle and false, whose eyes keep drifting to those guards by the doors. De Braos is telling a story now, some hunting anecdote that has the Normans roaring with laughter. He's animated, charming even. You watch him and think, this is a man who burns villages for strategic advantage. This is a man who has spent years systematically destroying Welsh independence in this region. And now he's playing the magnanimous host, the peacemaker, the Christian lord extending fellowship to his former enemies. Which version is the performance? Or are they both real? Is he simultaneously capable of genuine hospitality and calculated murder? The question hangs in your mind as the second course arrives. More meat, swan this time, a luxury dish meant to impress. The servers move efficiently, professionally. You watch them, looking for what? A sign? A signal? Something that will tell you whether you're a guest or a target. But they're just servants doing their jobs, and you're just a Welsh prince trying to read doom in the placement of dishes and the angles of armed men. Your fellow Welsh leaders are attempting conversation, but it's stilted, awkward. Everyone is performing normalcy, while terror hums beneath every word. You think about your wife's face as you left. You think about your son's excitement about the feast. You wonder if they're the last faces you'll ever see that looked at you with love instead of calculation. The fire crackles, the wine flows, the Norman knights grow louder, more boisterous, and you sit there, trapped between courses, waiting for the moment that will tell you whether your paranoia was justified or whether you've spent this entire feast terrified of nothing. But deep in your gut, beneath the fear and the forced smiles and the taste of rich food turning to ash in your mouth, you already know. You've always known. From the moment you read that invitation, from the moment you mounted your horse, from the moment those castle gates closed behind you with that iron finality, you've known. This isn't reconciliation. This is theatre. And you're not a guest at this feast. You're the main course. You see it happen in slow motion, though in reality it takes less than a heartbeat. William de Braos's hand, resting casually on the table, shifts. Not a dramatic gesture, just a subtle movement, fingers tapping once, twice, then curling into a fist. His eyes flicker toward the doors. It's nothing. It's everything. And in that instant, you know with absolute certainty that you're about to die. The sound comes first. The massive oak doors of the great hall slamming shut with a boom that echoes off stone walls like thunder. Then the metallic scrape of bolts sliding into place, iron bars dropping across the exits with that particular finality that means there's no going back, no escape, no mercy. Your head snaps toward the nearest door, just in time to see a Norman guard turning away from it, his hand still on the bolt, his face expressionless, professional. This isn't improvisation. This is choreography. For one frozen moment, the hall is silent. The Norman knights have stopped laughing. The servants have stepped back against the walls. Even the fire seems to hold its breath. And then, Prince Gwrgant ap Sysil, seated 3 places down from you, lunges to his feet with a roar of rage and terror. He's reaching for a weapon he doesn't have, his hands scrabbling at his belt where a sword should be but isn't, because you all came as guests, as men accepting hospitality, as fools who believed in the sanctity of breaking bread together. That's when the hall explodes into chaos. Guards who moments ago were standing at respectful attention suddenly surge forward, hands on sword hilts, moving with the coordinated precision of men following a rehearsed plan. Welsh leaders are shouting, overturning benches, scrambling backward or forward, or anywhere that might offer escape. There is nowhere. Every exit is barred. Every guard is Norman. Every Welsh nobleman in this hall is surrounded by enemies who are pretending to be hosts. Your own hands fly to your tunic, fingers closing around the small dagger concealed there. You drag it free and the blade catches firelight. Pitiful, inadequate, a dinner knife against armored soldiers. But it's something. It's the difference between dying armed and dying helpless. You're on your feet now, the bench kicked backward, your heart slamming against your ribs so hard you can feel it in your throat. Prince Cadwallon is beside you, his face white with fury, and together you back away from the high table toward what? There's nowhere to go. The guards are converging, a tightening circle of mail and steel and grim determination. Someone crashes into you from behind, Geoffrey ap Hyle, wild-eyed, bleeding from his temple where a Norman fist has already found its mark. The 3 of you cluster together instinctively, predators turned prey, trying to make yourselves a harder target through proximity. Your dagger is raised, trembling in your grip, and you're calculating the impossible mathematics of survival. Can you fight your way to a door? Can you take a hostage? Can you do anything except die? The smell hits you then, cutting through the wood smoke and spiced wine, the copper tang of blood. Someone has already been cut. You don't see who, but you hear the scream, high and sharp, and abruptly silenced. The rushes on the floor, fresh and fragrant when you entered, are already darkening with spreading stains. Wine from overturned cups mixes with blood, creating pools of dark liquid that look black in the firelight. This is happening. This is real. The nightmare you've been dreading since you read that invitation is unfolding exactly as your gut warned you it would. A guard moves toward you, and you slash with your dagger, a desperate, untrained swipe that he parries almost casually with his armored forearm. The impact jars your wrist, nearly knocks the blade from your hand. You're not a soldier. You're a prince, a leader, a politician who commands warriors, but rarely fights personally. And these men surrounding you are professional killers who have done this before. Maybe many times before. You can see it in their eyes, not hatred, not even excitement, just focus, just men doing a job. Hands grab you from behind, multiple hands, strong and unyielding. Your dagger arm is wrenched upward, twisted until your fingers open involuntarily and the blade clatters to the floor. You try to wrench free, throwing your weight backward, but there are too many of them. Your legs are kicked out from under you. Your face slams into the table edge as you go down, and you taste blood. Your own this time. The rushes against your cheek are scratchy and damp, and you can smell the blood soaking into them. Smell the spilled wine. Smell your own sweat and fear. From your position on the floor, you have a horizontal view of hell. Welsh boots scrabbling for purchase. Norman boots planted firmly, advancing. More screams, some cut short, others extending into long wails of despair. You see Gwrgant dragged past you, 3 guards holding him, his face a mask of blood and rage. You see Cadwallon, take a sword pommel to the side of his head, and drop like a stone. You see servants standing against the walls, watching with blank faces, and you realize they knew. Of course they knew. Everyone knew, except the men who needed to know, except the targets. You manage to turn your head, and through the chaos, you find William Deadliest. He's still seated at the high table, still in his chair, watching the slaughter unfold with the attention of a man observing a complex piece of machinery in operation. There's no rage in his expression, no triumph, no emotion at all, really. This isn't personal for him. This is strategy. This is problem solving. You and your fellow Welsh leaders were threats to Norman expansion, complications in his territorial ambitions, and now you're being efficiently eliminated, and he's watching to ensure the job is done correctly. Your eyes meet his for just a moment. Predator and prey, murderer and victim, host and betrayed guest. And he smiles. Not a cruel smile, not a mocking smile, almost a friendly smile, as if to say, "You understand, don't you? This is just politics. This is just how the game is played. No hard feelings." The weight on your back increases as more guards pile on, pinning you completely. Your cheek is pressed into the rushes hard enough that you can feel individual stalks crushing beneath your skin. The sounds of struggle are diminishing, not because the Welsh leaders have given up, but because they're being systematically subdued or killed. The chaos is resolving into Norman efficiency. The trap has fully closed. And the last thing you see, before hands grip your hair and wrench your head back, before the cold reality of blade against throat becomes your final sensation, is that smile. That calm, satisfied, utterly reasonable smile from a man who has just turned hospitality into murder and considers it a good day's work. The silence that follows violence is always worse than the violence itself. It's heavy, thick, broken only by ragged breathing and the crackle of the fire that continues burning as if nothing has happened. As if the great hall hasn't just been transformed into an abattoir. Your body lies where it fell, crumpled among the rushes, and the warmth is already beginning to leave your limbs. You're past caring now, past fear, past anything. But the story isn't over, because William Deadliest isn't finished. The bodies are dragged away without ceremony. Yours, Gergant's, Cadwallan's, Geoffrey's, all the Welsh leaders who accepted an invitation to a Christmas feast and found only death. You're not carried with honour. You're not treated like fallen princes. You're hauled by your ankles like slaughtered game, your head bouncing over the threshold, leaving a smear of blood across stone that servants will scrub away in the morning. Outside, your men, the warriors who rode with you, who waited in the bailey, have already been dealt with. They never had a chance. The moment the hall doors closed, Norman soldiers fell upon them. Some fought, some fled, all died. The Christmas snow is turning red in patches, and the castle dogs are already nosing at the bodies. But Deadliest has learned something crucial about power. It's not enough to eliminate the current threat. You have to eliminate the future threat too. And that's where his calculations turn from brutal to monstrous. Because you have a son, 7 years old, a child who was excited about the Christmas feast, who thought he was going on an adventure, a child who, in 10 or 15 years, might grow into a man seeking vengeance for his murdered father. Deadliest looks at this equation and sees only one logical solution. The order is given quietly, almost as an afterthought. The children too, just like that. No debate, no hesitation. It's presented as strategic necessity, as simple risk management. Welsh princes have long memories and longer grudges. Better to cut the bloodline now, to ensure there's no one left to carry the grievance forward into the next generation. It's the same logic that governs pruning trees or culling livestock. Remove the problem at the root, and you won't have to deal with it later. Your son doesn't understand what's happening when the soldiers come for him. Why would he? He's 7. He thinks the Norman soldiers are there to escort him somewhere, maybe to see his father. maybe to join the feast finally. He goes with them trustingly, the way children do, the way they're supposed to be able to do. And then, somewhere in the cold December night, in some corner of Abergavenny Castle, where screams won't carry far, they kill him. Quickly, probably. Efficiently. A child doesn't take much killing. And just like that, your bloodline, centuries of Welsh princes, generations of resistance to Norman expansion, ends in a castle courtyard with a small body that will be buried in an unmarked grave. When you tally the dead, the numbers are staggering. You, Seisil ap Dyfnwal, Prince of Upper Gwent, your son, Gurgant ap Seisil and his men, Cadwallon ap Maedog and his retinue, Geoffrey ap Hywel and his warriors, all the minor nobles and household knights who made the fatal mistake of accepting hospitality. The estimates run to 70 or more Welsh leaders and fighting men, slaughtered in a single night during a Christmas feast under the guarantee of safe conduct. It's a massacre disguised as a dinner party. It's genocide served between courses. And here's the thing that should chill you. This works. Militarily, strategically, it works brilliantly. With one night of calculated betrayal, de Braos has decapitated Welsh resistance in the region. There's no one left to coordinate opposition, no one to rally troops, no one to negotiate terms or forge alliances. The power structure has been gutted, and the surviving Welsh are left leaderless, terrified, and completely demoralized. Norman expansion into your territories proceeds almost unopposed. From de Braos's perspective, this is a spectacular success. He's achieved in one evening what might have taken years of conventional warfare. But even by medieval standards, and these are standards that include casual torture, public executions, and wars of extinction, this is shocking. The violation of hospitality is bad enough. The murder of children is worse. Together, they create a reputation that will haunt de Braos for the rest of his life and beyond. He becomes known as the Ogre of Abergavenny, not the victor or the conqueror, or any of the titles that medieval lords craved. The ogre, a monster, a creature beyond the pale of civilized behavior, even civilized medieval behavior, where civilized already includes a staggering amount of violence. The servants return to clean the Great Hall, and they do it with the mechanical efficiency of people who have scrubbed blood from floors before. The rushes are gathered up, soaked with wine and blood and the fluids that leak from bodies when they die, and burned. New rushes are laid down, fresh and sweet-smelling, hiding the stains beneath. The tables are righted, the dishes are cleared, the fire is tended. By morning, the hall looks exactly as it did before the feast, as if nothing happened, as if 70 men didn't die here. The castle returns to its normal rhythms, guards changing shifts, servants preparing meals, de Braos conducting business in his solar. And that's perhaps the most horrifying detail of all. For de Braos, this is just another day. The massacre complete, he returns to his wine, to his correspondence, to the mundane work of administering his holdings. He might draft a letter to King Henry II, justifying the killings as necessary to maintain order. He might review accounts with his steward, checking grain stores and tax revenues. He might even plan his next feast, because life goes on, power continues, and there are always more enemies to neutralize or allies to cultivate. The nickname spreads through Wales like wildfire, the Ogre of Abergavenny. It's whispered in Welsh villages, repeated by bards, carried by travellers until everyone knows the story. Everyone knows that William de Braos invited Welsh princes to a Christmas feast and murdered them all, children included. And here's what that nickname tells you. Even in an era where brutality was standard, where might made right, where violence was the primary language of politics, there were still lines you weren't supposed to cross. Hospitality was sacred. Children were supposed to be spared. To violate both in a single night made you a monster even among monsters. But monsters, as it turns out, can be very effective rulers. De Braos's lands are secure. His position is unassailable. His king is pleased with his results, if not his methods. The Welsh resistance in his region is broken, scattered, leaderless. And if the price of that success is a nickname that will echo through history as a synonym for treachery and cruelty, well, de Braus seems willing to pay it. Because in the end, the medieval world doesn't punish effective monsters. It fears them, hates them, tells stories about them, but it lets them keep their castles, their lands, and their power. And sometimes, that's all a monster really wants. You're 10 years old, and you're the King of Scotland, and right now you'd give anything to be literally anyone else. Your name is James II, and technically, you're the most powerful person in this room, in this castle, in this entire kingdom. But, technically, doesn't mean much when you're a child surrounded by adults playing a game whose rules you're only beginning to understand. And tonight, at Edinburgh Castle, you're about to learn a lesson that will haunt you for the rest of your life. Kingship doesn't mean power. Sometimes it just means you have to watch. The year is 1440, and Scotland is eating itself alive. Your father, James I, was murdered 3 years ago, stabbed to death in a sewer while trying to escape assassins. You inherited his crown and his kingdom's chaos. Scotland is a nightmare of competing factions, ambitious nobles, and blood feuds that stretch back generations. Everyone wants to control you, which means everyone wants to control Scotland. And the most dangerous players in this game are the Douglases. The Douglas family isn't just powerful, they're a state within the state. They control vast territories in southern Scotland. They command armies larger than yours. They have wealth that makes the royal treasury look like a beggar's purse. The current head of the family, William Douglas, is only 16 years old, but that doesn't matter. He was born into power, raised in it, and he wears it with the casual confidence of someone who's never had to question whether he belongs at the top of the hierarchy. His younger brother David is with him always, loyal, and nearly as formidable. Together, they represent everything your regents fear, a power base that could eclipse the crown itself. So your regents, the adults who actually run Scotland while you play at being king, have decided the Douglases need to go. And they've chosen a particular method to accomplish this, a method with a long and ugly pedigree. They're going to invite the Douglas brothers to dinner. You don't know this yet. You're 10. You're told that important nobles are coming to dine at Edinburgh Castle, that it's a state occasion, that you need to be present to represent the crown. You put on your finest clothes, velvet and ermine, a miniature king costume that makes you look like a child playing dress-up. Because that's what you are. A child playing at adult games while the real players move pieces you can't even see yet. The Douglas brothers arrive with appropriate ceremony. They have safe conduct, formal, written guarantees of their safety, signed by your regents and sealed with official seals. These documents are supposed to be inviolable, backed by law and custom and the sacred traditions of Scottish hospitality. The Douglases trust them because what choice do they have? To refuse the invitation would be to admit fear, to confess that they don't trust the crown. So they come, and they bow to you, and William Douglas's smile is confident, because he understands the game. He thinks this dinner is about negotiation, about the regents acknowledging Douglas power and finding some accommodation. He's wrong. The feast begins normally enough. Edinburgh's Great Hall is magnificent. High ceilings, stone walls softened by tapestries, a fire roaring in the hearth. The tables are laden with food that even a jaded 10-year-old king can appreciate. Roasted meats, rich stews, fresh bread, pastries dripping with honey. Wine flows freely, and the conversation is jovial, full of jokes and gossip and the performative friendliness that medieval nobles use to disguise the knives they're metaphorically holding behind their backs. You sit at the high table, because that's where kings sit. Even 10-year-old kings who would rather be literally anywhere else. William Douglas is seated nearby, close enough that you can see him relaxing as the meal progresses, see the tension draining from his shoulders. He's 16 and powerful and surrounded by armed men who've sworn to protect him. What could possibly go wrong? The servants bring out the next course, and you notice something odd. They're carrying a covered platter, larger than the others, and they're moving with unusual solemnity. The hall grows quieter. Conversation doesn't stop exactly, but it dampens, as if everyone is holding their breath. The servants approach the high table. They stop in front of the Douglas brothers, and then, with ceremony that would be appropriate for presenting a king's crown, they lift the cover. Underneath is a bull's head. Black, massive, grotesque. The eyes are dull and staring. The mouth is open, tongue lolling. It's been severed roughly, and you can see the ragged flesh of the neck, the white gleam of bone. It sits on the platter like an accusation, like a judgment, like a death sentence made manifest. And in that instant, every person in the hall who knows Scottish tradition, which is everyone except possibly you, understands exactly what this means. The black bull's head is a symbol of death, not a threat, not a warning, a statement of fact. It means the sentence has already been passed, the judgment already rendered. The Douglases aren't here as guests, they're here as condemned men. This feast isn't a negotiation. It's an execution disguised as hospitality, and the main course is death. You see the realization hit William Douglas like a physical blow. His face goes white. His hand flies to his belt where a sword should be but isn't, because you don't bring weapons to a dinner where safe conduct has been guaranteed. His brother David is on his feet, chair crashing backward, looking wildly for an exit. But the guards are already moving. They've been positioned all along, waiting for this moment. And now they surge forward, with the coordinated precision of men following a carefully rehearsed plan. "My lord!" William Douglas shouts, and it takes you a moment to realize he's shouting at you. "You gave us safe conduct. You promised!" His voice cracks with desperation and fury and betrayal. He's looking at you like you can stop this, like you have the power to wave your hand and call off the guards. And that's when you learn the cruelest lesson of your young life. You don't. You're the king, but you're not in charge. You're a prop in someone else's play. Your regents sit calmly, faces impassive, as the guards seize the Douglas brothers. There's no trial, no formal accusation, no opportunity for defense. The Black Bull's head is verdict and sentence combined. William and David are dragged from the hall, shouting, struggling, appealing to honor and law and the sacred protection of royal hospitality. No one responds. No one intervenes. You sit frozen in your chair, small hands gripping the armrests, watching what power actually looks like when it's wielded by adults who know how to use it. They take the Douglas brothers to Castle Hill, just outside Edinburgh Castle's walls. They don't waste time. There's no elaborate execution, no public spectacle, just a block, an axe, and 2 swift strokes that end the Douglas threat permanently. William Douglas, 16 years old and master of vast estates. David Douglas, younger still and guilty of nothing but being born into the wrong family. Both dead within minutes of the Black Bull's head appearing on the dinner table. You hear it from inside the castle. The sound carries through stone walls and closed doors. The roar of the small crowd that's gathered, the priest's hurried prayers, and then the distinctive sound of an axe striking. Once, twice. Then, silence. When your servants come to escort you to your chambers, their faces are carefully blank. No one meets your eyes. No one explains what just happened or why. You're the king. You're supposed to understand. That night, lying in your bed in Edinburgh Castle, you stare at the ceiling and try to process what you've witnessed. 2 young men, not much older than you really, invited to dinner under promises of safety. A Black Bull's head presented like a course in the meal. Guards seizing them while you sat helpless. The sound of execution echoing through the castle walls. And the lessons sinking in like poison. Hospitality is theatre. Trust is suicide. Your crown doesn't make you powerful. It makes you a symbol that more powerful men use to legitimize their murders. The Black Dinner, they'll call it in the histories. Not the Douglas execution or the removal of a threat. The Black Dinner. As if the meal itself was the crime. As if the food was somehow complicit in the betrayal. And in a way, it was. Every dish served was part of the deception. Every moment of false hospitality was a step in the trap. The Douglases died between courses, murdered at a king's table, under a king's protection, with a king watching helplessly as power demonstrated what it actually means to rule. You're 10 years old, and you've just learned that the crown on your head doesn't make you a king. It makes you a witness, and sometimes, in the brutal calculus of medieval politics, that's the cruelest role of all. Here's something that should terrify you. In 1531, a cook named Richard Rose allegedly put poison in the porridge, and King Henry VIII was so afraid of ending up as the victim that he invented a new form of execution specifically for poisoners. Not hanging, not beheading, boiling alive. Because if there's one thing that unites medieval and Renaissance rulers across centuries and borders, it's the paralyzing fear that the next meal might be their last. The incident happens at the Rochester residence of Bishop John Fisher, one of the most powerful churchmen in England. It's February, and the household is preparing dinner for the bishop and his guests, but Fisher has invited the local poor to join them, an act of Christian charity that's common among medieval clergy. Feed the hungry, especially during Lent, and God will smile upon your generosity. It's a kind gesture. It's also about to become a massacre. The porridge is served, a thick, hearty pottage that's standard fare for feeding large groups cheaply. The poor eat first, grateful for hot food on a cold day. The household servants eat next, and then people start dying. Not quickly, not cleanly. They're vomiting, convulsing, screaming in agony as their insides rebel against whatever's been mixed into that innocent-looking gruel. 2 people die outright. Many more become violently, agonizingly ill. Bishop Fisher himself is spared only because he didn't eat the porridge that day. Some accounts say he was fasting, others that he simply didn't fancy it. Pure luck. The difference between life and death served in a bowl. Richard Roose is arrested immediately. He's either the cook himself or someone with access to the kitchen. The historical record is frustratingly vague about his exact role. But he's blamed for the poisoning, and whether he actually did it becomes almost irrelevant in the face of what happens next. Because King Henry VIII hears about the incident, and he absolutely loses his mind with fear. Henry is 39 years old at this point, in the prime of his reign, and he's terrified of being poisoned. It's not paranoia, or rather, it's extremely well-justified paranoia. Poison is the weapon of choice for anyone who wants to kill someone powerful, without getting their hands visibly bloody. It's subtle, it's deniable. It can be administered by a servant, a food taster, anyone with access to the kitchen. And once you start thinking about how many people touch your food between the kitchen and your mouth, you realize just how vulnerable you are. So Henry does what terrified tyrants do. He makes an example so horrific that no one will ever dare try it again. He pushes through Parliament a new law, the Act for Poisoning, that mandates a specific punishment for anyone convicted of murder by poison. Not execution. That's too quick, too merciful. The law requires that poisoners be boiled alive in water or lead until dead. Read that again. Boiled, alive, lowered into a cauldron of water that's heated slowly, so you have time to feel every second of your skin blistering, your flesh cooking, your body literally being boiled like meat. Richard Roose's execution takes place at Smithfield in London, and it's designed to be as public and as horrible as possible. They erect a special scaffold. They install a massive cauldron. They fill it with water and light the fire beneath it. And then they bring out Roose, and they lower him in. The historical accounts are mercifully sparse on details, but they don't need to be graphic. Your imagination can fill in the gaps, the screaming, the thrashing, the smell of burning flesh, the crowd watching in fascinated horror as a man is cooked alive for the crime of, allegedly, poisoning porridge. The message is clear: poison the powerful, and your death will be so agonizing that it will echo through history as a warning. Henry wants every cook, every servant, every person who handles food in every noble household in England to know that if they even think about adding something lethal to the soup, this is what awaits them. Not a quick drop from the gallows, not the merciful stroke of an axe. Hours of unimaginable agony as your body is slowly boiled. And it works, sort of. Noble households across England immediately increase their security measures around food. Food taste has become ubiquitous. Unfortunate souls whose job is to sample every dish before it reaches their lord's lips, gambling their lives with every bite. Kitchens are locked and guarded. Cooks are watched constantly. Some nobles start bringing their own provisions when travelling, trusting no one else's hospitality. The paranoia that Henry feels spreads like a plague through the upper classes. But here's the dark irony. All these precautions don't make anyone safer. They just make everyone more afraid, because now every meal is suspect. Every stomach ache could be the beginning of poisoning. Every servant is a potential assassin. The act of eating, the most basic, necessary human activity, becomes fraught with terror. You can't enjoy your food when you're wondering if it's been poisoned. You can't relax at dinner when you're watching your food taster's face for signs of distress. The fear becomes self-perpetuating. Nobles who once feasted with gusto now pick at their plates. Kings who once reveled in elaborate banquets now eat simple foods prepared by trusted servants in locked rooms. The dinner table, which should be a place of community and celebration, becomes just another battlefield in the endless war of medieval politics. And the ultimate weapon isn't the sword or the poison itself. It's the fear of poison, the paranoia that transforms every meal into a potential assassination attempt. Richard Roos's execution, whether he was guilty or not, becomes a symbol of how deeply poison had infected not just bodies, but minds. The medieval world was already brutal, but at least you could see a sword coming. Poison was invisible, tasteless, able to turn the most intimate act, sharing food, into a death sentence. And once that trust was broken, once the dinner table became a place of suspicion rather than fellowship, something fundamental about medieval society shattered. Even kings couldn't enjoy their feasts anymore, and that, perhaps, is the most effective poison of all. Your Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, one of the most powerful Huguenot Protestant leaders in France, and you've just received the invitation of a lifetime, a royal wedding, in Paris. The king's sister, Margaret of Valois, is marrying Henry of Navarre, a Protestant prince. It's being framed as the ultimate peace gesture, Catholic royalty joining with Protestant nobility to end the wars of religion that have been tearing France apart for over a decade. This is reconciliation. This is the future. This is everything you've been fighting for. It's also a trap, but you won't realize that until it's far too late. The year is 1572, and France has been cannibalizing itself over religion. Catholics versus Protestants, Huguenots, as the French Protestants are called. Massacres, assassinations, armies burning villages and slaughtering civilians. It's brutal, even by medieval standards, and everyone is exhausted. So when the royal family extends this olive branch, when they propose a wedding that will symbolically unite the two faiths, it feels like salvation. Finally, peace. Finally, an end to the bloodshed. Thousands of Huguenots pour into Paris for the celebration. Not just you, but the entire Protestant leadership. Nobles, military commanders, wealthy merchants, intellectuals. Everyone who matters in the Huguenot power structure is gathering in the Catholic capital for a wedding that's supposed to herald a new era of tolerance. The streets are festive. The mood is optimistic. You're celebrating in the heart of enemy territory, but the king himself has guaranteed your safety. What could go wrong? The wedding takes place on August 18th, 1572. It's magnificent. All the pageantry and splendor that French royalty can muster. Margaret in her wedding gown, Henry in his finest clothes, the cathedral packed with nobles from both faiths. You attend the celebrations, the feasts, the balls. For days, Paris is one long party, and you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, this peace is real. 6 days later, in the early morning hours of August 24th, the feast day of St. Bartholomew, the bells start ringing. But they're not ringing for prayer, they're ringing as a signal. And suddenly, Paris erupts into orchestrated slaughter. Catholic mobs, armed and organized, pour into the streets. They have lists, names and addresses of every prominent Huguenot in the city. Your name is at the top. You're in your lodgings when they break down the door. You fight, because what else can you do? But you're outnumbered, and this isn't a battle. It's an execution. They stab you, throw you from the window, and your body lands in the street where the mob tears it apart. The Admiral of France, murdered in his nightshirt, mutilated by a crowd that's been given permission to unleash every ounce of religious hatred they've been storing. But you're just the beginning. The massacre spreads like wildfire through Paris. Huguenots are dragged from their beds, from their hiding places, from churches where they'd sought sanctuary. Men, women, children. It doesn't matter. The streets run with blood. Bodies are thrown into the Seine until the river itself seems to flow red. The killing goes on for days, then spreads to other cities across France. By the time it's over, somewhere between 5,000 and 30,000 Huguenots are dead. And here's the familiar pattern. This wasn't spontaneous mob violence. This was planned, orchestrated. The wedding was the lure. Gather all the Protestant leadership in one place, make them feel safe, make them lower their guard. Then, once they're trapped in a hostile city, cut them down in a single coordinated strike. It's Abergavenny Castle, 1175. It's Edinburgh Castle, 1440. It's the same strategy, refined over centuries, proving that it works too well to abandon. The excuse, when it comes, is depressingly familiar. They were plotting against the crown. They were a threat to stability. We had no choice but to act decisively. The same justifications William de Braose might have used. The same logic that killed the Douglas brothers. Hospitality as camouflage for murder. Celebration as the setup for slaughter. What's chilling is that this is 1572. We're out of the medieval period, into the Renaissance, the era of enlightenment and humanism and sophisticated political philosophy. And yet the tactics haven't changed at all, because why would they? The deadly dinner party, or in this case the deadly wedding, remains devastatingly effective. You can't refuse a royal invitation without insulting the crown. You can't stay away without looking cowardly. And once you accept, once you gather in your enemy's territory under promises of safe conduct, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre becomes one of the defining atrocities of the 16th century, a byword for treachery and religious violence. But it's not an aberration. It's a direct descendant of every deadly feast that came before it. 400 years separate Abergavenny from Paris, but the strategy is identical. Extend hospitality, gather your enemies, then slaughter them before they realize the celebration was always a funeral. Theirs. As long as there's power to consolidate and enemies to eliminate, the feast will be weaponized. The invitation will be the trap. And trust, that most fundamental human currency, will be the first casualty served between courses.